This podcast is about introducing our fans to the animals, plants, and other products that we work with at Josh's Frogs. It's an opportunity to paint a picture of our hobby that is refreshing. We want you guys to be successful with the animals that you're keeping, and we want our hobby to grow ethically and sustainably into the future. Welcome to the Josh's Frogs podcast. Today I have Max with me. We're going to talk about millipedes, but before we do that, I just want to say that the Josh's Frogs podcast is sponsored by Josh's Frogs, your one-stop shop for all reptile and amphibian supplies. We carry all the live feeders, the live plants, the live reptiles and amphibians, and all the supplies you need to take care of them. Our extensive volumes of library of videos and articles, and our excellent customer service, and then our health guarantees, unmatched in the industry, all set you guys up to make a connection with nature and do that easily. So first off, I want to introduce you, Max. You work here with some of our bugs, but specifically we're going to talk about millipedes. So tell us, when did you start working at Josh's Frogs, and kind of what do you do at Josh's Frogs?
So I started working here about 2 years ago. I hired in as a isopod technician. And from there, I have brought on millipedes, and our new-ish project is praying mantises.
Oh, cool. Now, Max, pretend you're talking to somebody that's in our industry, or talking to like maybe our aunt or uncle that doesn't know anything about bugs or anything. Like, describe like what's a week look like? What are like some of the tasks that you're doing? What's a day look like? Explain some of the stuff that you do.
So a lot of the time, I'm actually playing with dirt. Because all of our bugs are cleanup crew, so they hang out in the substrates. A basic day of feeding is, I go through my room that I'm responsible for, has about 470. We just upped it recently. We're almost at 500.
Oh my gosh.
So we go through and feed them and mist them all. And then I go and take care of our millipedes, and they get a little piece of fruit in each corner. They get a quick spray down, see if there's any babies showing up.
Cool. Yeah. Cool. Now, what was your experience like before you came to Josh's Frogs? Did you have a lot of bug experience? Were you working with a lot of invertebrates?
I did not. Before hiring on here, I was working at a local pet store, and that kind of reignited me getting into reptiles and amphibians and fish and whatnot. And then I met someone there that taught me about bioactive. And so then I made my first bioactive tank, and from there I was pretty hooked.
That's awesome. Now, you talked a little bit about adding projects in your department. Like, how do you guys determine to add how do you guys come up with the idea to start a new project in the department? Like, who comes up with that idea? Like, how do you guys come up with those new ideas?
That's a great question. I basically just have my manager come to me and be like, hey, is this a project you would be interested in? And most of the time, that's a yes.
Cool. So talk to me about millipedes. Like, when did Phil start talking about millipedes? Like, when did that project start going?
So our millipede project has been going for a little bit over a year now. And with that being said, very soon, some of ours are going to be going live on the website. Cool. And with that kind of goes with the reproductive rate of millipedes.
Yep.
Is it takes about a year for them to mature out and then get comfortable in their enclosure. Any wild caughts tend to die off at that point, and then our new generation comes back in.
Cool. All right, now pretend, because you're not really pretending, but for you have to pretend. Pretend that we don't know anything about millipedes. We don't know what a millipede is. We don't know what the difference between a millipede and a centipede is, and we don't know what a millipede versus any other bug. Explain to us like we're dumb. What is a millipede, and how do we know if something's a millipede and it's not some other type of bug?
Okay, so millipedes are a group of inverts that are fossorial, so they live in the substrate. They basically break down decaying organic matter, so leaves, wood. Their main source of food is basically fallen trees and the soil.
Cool.
They actually do a little bit more breaking down than even earthworms do. So they break down and they actually move the soil and the substrate and whatnot quite a bit. As far as how they differ from centipedes is they're in the same family of Diplopoda, and centipedes basically just branched off and they decide to be predators, and where millipedes are not.
Interesting. So would that mean for handling and stuff like that a centipede might be bitey and a millipede might not be bitey? Does that hold true?
Okay. Exactly. And also centipedes are venomous. So they actually do have venom in their jaws and also on their feet.
Interesting. On their feet. We'll have to do another podcast on centipedes, but not in the hobby because I don't think you should be keeping those.
Yes. And then millipedes are actually poisonous. So they secrete toxin.
Interesting.
And it's just as a defense mechanism, not so much as a predatory thing.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about millipedes and their body. Like we've always heard the tons of legs. What's the exoskeleton like? Talk to me about how the millipedes are set up.
So millipedes are they're inverts, so they have a exoskeleton. They'll go down into the substrate and molt. So they basically shed the old exoskeleton and come out with a fresh new squishy one that they then have to wait for it to harden up. Actually, none of them have 1,000 legs, except in 2021, they discovered one that has over 1,000 legs, and it's called the Persephone millipede.
Really? Okay. Now talk to me about sizes of millipedes, like the ones that we work with. What are the sizes? And then some of the ones that we don't work with. Can you talk about any of the sizing?
Yeah. So we actually work with some that are half an inch all the way up to about 6 inches.
Okay.
The biggest ones that are technically illegal in the hobby, but that might be changing soon. We're waiting to hear back and everything. But those would be the giant African millipedes, which those ones get 18 inches, I believe.
Oh, wow. That is huge.
Yeah, that is a big millipede.
Wow. Now, you said they live in the substrate. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of behavior? Do you see them coming out of the substrate every now and then? Are they mainly in the substrate? What's the behavior look like on those guys?
So a lot of the time you are keeping a dirt friend and you don't see them. But a good portion of the time, especially when they come up to eat or after they molt and stuff, they will come up to the substrate. They'll munch on some leaves, munch on some food, hang out and walk around a little bit. It also really kind of depends on their cycle and where they are with molting is depending on kind of where they're going to be in the substrate. So when they're fresh or when they're regular and just kind of going about their day, they're going to be in the top, either on the surface or within the first couple inches.
Gotcha.
When they go to molt, that's when they're actually going to burrow down, spend some time underground, make a little area, a little cocoon almost underground, and that's where they go and molt.
Cool. Now, talk a little bit about how we set them up here at Josh's Frogs, and then my next question will be about how people should set them at home. So talk about how we set them up here, and what are we feeding them, and what's the care kind of stuff that we're doing with those guys.
Okay, so we set them up in a 80-quart Sterilite bin, and we fill that about 3/4 of the way up with a very high-quality substrate, something like flake soil, if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
And then we put a whole bunch of leaf litter, some botanicals, and some cork bark on top. And that's pretty much how we keep them. Really, really simple. And then as far as cares, it's just misting once or twice a week as needed. Keep them at room temperature. Let them have the seasonal sways and changes and whatnot with temperature. And that the seasonal changes is what triggers breeding behavior.
Cool. Now talk to me about breeding. What's the seasonal changes kind of start that off, but how are they breeding and what's kind of how many babies are we talking about? And give me some.
This is a really interesting one. So as far as breeding goes, it's pretty simple. Make sure you have a male and make sure you have a female. Toss them into the bin and it's going to happen. It's all like a 90% sure thing. Yep. As far as how many they have, some species will literally have hundreds of babies. So the giant pinkfoot right here, that one was our first one to start breeding. We had 3 females in there. Each of them had about 2 to 3 batches, and that came out to probably about over 900 babies.
That's a lot of babies. Maybe the Milla is their babies, not necessarily their legs.
Yeah, so each batch of eggs that they drop for that specific would be 100 to 300.
Wow. Now, when you're talking about them laying their eggs, are those visible? Are they down in the substrate? How does that work?
So that's when millipedes get a little gross. So basically in their droppings, their poop, is where they actually seed their eggs. So it's in a little capsule covered in their poop, and they drop it like that. So whenever you go to do substrate changes or anything to them, which you don't really want to do substrate changes.
Yep.
Leave it all in there.
Yep.
And that's where the eggs are.
Gotcha. So what's the maintenance long term? Like, how often are you changing out the substrate on those guys?
So you actually don't change out the substrate as they break it down, because they're literally eating their substrate. That's their main source of food. Is that it'll start to compact into like almost a compost, and then it actually holds their burrows better. So you just keep adding substrates.
Oh, interesting.
We haven't hit the point where we have to pull anything out yet.
Cool. Now, if somebody wanted to keep a millipede or two at home, how big of an enclosure are we talking about? How deep should the substrate? Like, how would we set them up? If I'm setting up, I want some dirt friends in my house. How should I set them up?
As far as if you're going for something like as a display piece, I would suggest anything from a 5 to a 10 gallon tank, about halfway filled with substrate. And then you could do your leaf litter and cork bark and what's up on top of that.
Cool. Now, any type of lighting, special lighting that we would need for those guys at all?
No, nothing special.
What about temperature? Are we heating that at all, or
room temperature? And you're going to want them to be able to change with the season. So if they get a little bit warm, totally fine. If they get a little bit cold, also fine.
That's awesome. It sounds like they're pretty resilient in that regard. Cool. Now, a lot of times when we keep pets, and especially when we're keeping invertebrates, we like to handle them. Can you talk a little bit about how handleable they are, and which ones are better or worse for handling? Can you talk a little bit about handling on the millipedes?
So they are handleable, but I'd suggest keeping it at a minimum, and also always using gloves.
Gotcha.
Because of those toxins that they secrete, it's anything from staining your skin to a burning, itching sensation.
Wow.
Yeah. One of the things that they actually secrete is hydrogen cyanide. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty dangerous then.
Yes. Don't lick the millipedes.
Now, maybe somebody has some other animals in their house. Like, what's the danger to like my dog, my cat, if my millipedes get out?
Honestly, I'm not quite sure on that, and I don't think it would be a good thing.
Gotcha. So keep your dogs and cats away from the millipedes, and so making sure that you have a lid on the enclosure is probably pretty wise
definitely.
in that regard. Yeah, cool.
They aren't good escape artists. They can climb very well, but they're not great escape artists.
Okay. Now, with bioactive stuff happening more and more, people are setting up their animals bioactively. Like, is there opportunities to keep millipedes with some other animals, or is that kind of frowned upon?
It's definitely doable. As with any cohab situation, you're always going to want to watch and really pay attention to them. But as long as the millipede is big enough that nothing like it won't fit in the mouth of the animal, you should be fine. So like suggestions would be like crested geckos, dart frogs, green anoles, smaller species.
Cool. All right. Now talk to us about the different varieties we have at Josh's Frogs, and what's the differences between those? How do they look different? What are the size difference? Give me compare and contrast all those guys.
So we actually have 32 different types of millipedes right now.
Wow.
Yes. As we have ones that are like a half an inch, and that's one of the smaller flat blacks. It's called a serratus. And then we also have anything bigger like that, like the pinkfoot, which is right here. I can pull them out for you if you want to see them.
Yeah. Would love to do it. You brought your gloves.
I did bring my gloves. I came prepared.
And now you said these are the pink foot?
Yes. So this is the N. americanus, which is the scientific name. And these are the pinkfoot giant orange.
Pinkfoot giant orange.
Yes. Oh. So just like with handling, you always want to make sure you keep them very close to the ground. So, and they get scared, of course. But yeah, so he's one of our bigger ones. He's about 6 inches.
Wow.
These were our first ones to breed. Super cool species. They have these gorgeous little pink legs if he ever opens up.
So right now he's kind of curled up in a ball. That's kind of like a defense mechanism.
Yeah,
he thinks
definitely.
You're going to eat him.
Basically,
yeah. But you're not, Max.
Exactly.
You won't eat them.
No, I won't eat the millipede. But yeah, he's a really cool one. So he gets to about 6 inches, and that's full grown right there.
And then you said was that just a euphemism? Can you tell them apart, male and female?
So on those ones, here's actually a great one to look at. I don't want them to curl up. Are you guys able to see it right here?
Yeah.
So right there at about their 7th segment, it's a little extended. that would be how you tell it's a male.
Really?
If you want to get an even closer view, you'd flip him over and look on the underside of him, and you'd see the, what are they called? Gondopodes?
Really?
Yes. So
now, with size difference between the males and females, are they different sizes, or are they all the
no,
same
they're
size?
all the same
Okay,
size.
gotcha.
That's the only thing you really get to look for on that one is the cheat one is you look for the extended segment on the top.
Yep.
And if you really want to get tears and double check, make sure you look for that those sex organs on the underside.
Have you found any, like I know in a lot of other animal species, you tend to be skewed more males than females or more females than males. Do the millipedes tend to sex pretty evenly between the two sexes?
You can definitely go pretty evenly. Okay. You're going to want more females than males to get a successful breeding project going. But
Yep.
for the most part, having more females is going to be your best bet if you're going to try and breed.
Cool. Now, you talked a little bit about getting them going. Do they tend to be more seasonal, or is this something that produces like on a regular basis? How do they do that?
It differs from type to type. For the most part, they are seasonal, so they're going to go in either the fall or the spring, and then you might get an extra one in the summer.
Gotcha.
On either side. If they're in the fall, they'll do a first one in the summer and then do another one in the fall.
Cool. Now, we are doing captive breeding on even the millipedes. So we've taken our stance on captive bred animals and applied that to millipedes. Can you talk a little bit about differences that people would expect when they're getting a wild-caught millipede versus a captive bred millipede? I'm guessing you're talking ages and sizes and that kind of stuff, but what other differences might you see?
Definitely. So ours are going to be, as far as where you're going to be purchasing ours, is they're going to be younger, significantly younger and smaller, because you're going to be able to get that whole life cycle.
Gotcha.
And it's great that we are doing the captive breeding because all these they're wild caught. They don't typically do well in captivity. Most of the time you'll lose almost 50% or more if you get a big batch.
Wow.
And then, they'll breed for you maybe one time and then they could pass after that.
Yep. Now, when you're getting a millipede, what do you guys have any idea on the lifespan? Like how long are these millipedes going to live for?
Yeah, some of them will live 10 plus years.
Wow.
Yeah. For instance, so the interesting thing on some of ours is our Engordana species, the smoky oaks. Those ones, they take like a year or two from the adults to get to start to breed and reproduce. But then from the tiny baby until they can get to like sexual maturity is 3 years.
Are you kidding me? Wow. Yeah. That's a long time, especially in the invert world, to get sexually mature. Wow. That's crazy.
And then those ones will actually live 10, 15 years.
Wow. Yeah. A long-lasting pet, much longer than I would have expected. All right. Tell me anything else that you want to tell me about millipedes. Why should people keep them as pets? Anything else that you want to...
They're really fun. They're very interesting to watch. They're goofballs. For instance, like ours don't really like green apples. We normally feed them red apples. So when you feed them green apples, they'll actually go up and then they'll retract and be all super crazy about it. It's so funny to watch.
That's hilarious. Wow.
And then they'll sneak up to it slowly and do the same exact thing over and over.
That's awesome. Cool. I really like that they're a unique pet that most people don't think of as a pet. And so that's really cool that we're working with those. So cool.
They're really fun.
All right, last thing I want to do is the lightning round with you, Max. Right. So are you ready for these questions? If you don't have an answer to one, you can say skip or I don't really know, anything like that.
Okay.
We'll be fine. But I'll try to tee you up and learn a little bit more about you. So, all right, if money and space were no issue anymore, what's your dream pet? What animal are you keeping?
Mangrove monitor. Always wanted one. I think they're the coolest monitor lizard out there.
That's cool. We've had a lot of monitor lizards be named for that one. All right. Besides Josh's Frogs, what's another business that's really creating some really cool products or cool animals? Like who would you like to give a shout out to?
Personally, I really like the Exoterra tanks. Mm-hmm. I love the front opening. I love to have the waterproof reservoir in the bottom and everything because that's one of the things I love to do. I love building tanks.
Cool. All right, Max, what was your first pet?
Bearded dragon at 10 years old, and me and my dad bred him. We went to the San Diego Reptile Convention picked up a trio, and we bred him for a couple of years. It's really fun.
That's cool. Did you name your bearded dragon?
Yes. Unfortunately, one passed when I was really young. But there's a big guy and little guy.
That's a great 10-year-old name for pets. I love it. All right. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Zookeeper.
Really?
Of course.
Good.
Gotta
Good.
work in a zoo.
Good. All right. If you had an hour of free time, no one's going to bother you. You're just by yourself. What's the one thing you would do for an hour? You got an hour of free time.
Be building a tank.
Really? Good.
Because
Good.
I make mine with all waterfalls and all sorts of fun stuff like that.
Cool. All right. If you had the ear of a bunch of people, if everybody was listening to Max, what's one thing you would tell people?
That's a tough one. I don't know.
Cool. All right. Your favorite animal or plant in the whole world. What's your favorite?
Favorite animal or plant? I'd have to go with plants and go with Ficus pumila, the oak leaf creeping fig.
Cool. Nice background plant on terrarium.
It climbs amazingly.
That's cool. All right, Max, thank you for sharing your wisdom on these millipedes. People can check them out on the website. And then I know you've been a part of some other videos and blog articles that we've done here, so you can check out some of Max's work on joshsfrogs.com. But thanks a lot, Max, for joining us. And check out the millipedes on joshsfrogs.com.
Of course.
Cool. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoy this content and want to stay up to date, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow us across social media. We always want to bring you the best content, so let us know what you think in the comments. And for all your reptile and amphibian needs, be sure to check us out at joshsfrogs.com. We have an amazing selection. Until next time, stay curious, stay froggy, and keep exploring.